Welcome, 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 welcome,
Welcome, welcome, welcome, welcome, welcome,
welcome
to the
Constantine and I met just for our quick origin story of how this podcast came to be. Constantine, I was fortunate enough to get sponsored to go out to Singapore in not last year, the year before last, right? Constantine,
Gosh,
May
that's 2 years
23
ago.
something.
Yeah.
So anyways, I got sponsored to go out, met a lot of cool rum brands, and Constantine happened to be out. And Constantine and I had been following each other on the internet. And people ask how Constantine and I met. I go, we met online. And so anyways, we ended up going to a few different bars throughout Singapore, and Constantine and I, we got good chemistry. We're good buddies. And so we ended up having a few too many rums. And the person who helped secure the sponsorship, he is French. His name is Fred. He's the founder of the Rum Cartel, which is all like, it's very different from the Mexican cartels. I just need to say that. But they're all like, 150 members, but they're all very affluent because, of course, Singapore. But Fred, whenever he says things, like he has the very, very French accent. Hello, Brian. How are you doing today, monsieur? But when you say something that he like agrees with, he goes, yeah. it's just something, yeah. So anytime you hear Constantine go, yeah, it like throws me for a loop because it goes right back to when we were at Maison du Whiskey drinking Black Tot Last Consignment, which if you guys have not had the Last Consignment, it is amazing.
I would hope so. I would hope so. I've heard a lot of things.
Yeah.
I know, right?
We were in pretty deep at that point.
Yeah, we were in,
I've always been.
the fact that that was like one of the like later things that we tasted, we probably should have started there and then gone to everything else. But, because we kept going back and forth about, like, oh my God, it's going to be so expensive. Even if we split a tasting, like, whatever, let's do it. Do we not do it? And then one of the beverage director at the Shangri-La Origin bar, right? Origin at the Shangri-La, at Shangri-La Hotel. It's like, just go do it. So we ended up doing it. And then what came out of that was this podcast. So anyways, you're brought up to speed on, why we're here. But everybody, thank you for tuning into the latest episode of I was waiting for Constantine.
Hang on, sorry. I'm getting
You might have to leave the sentence.
We're gonna have no, you know what? We're leaving it in. Tyler's our amazing editor. Tyler, don't you dare take that out, sir.
Yeah, don't fix it in post. Don't fix it in post.
Don't you fix it in post. Anyways, but to all of our lovely listeners, welcome to the
rum.
See,
we are the rum.
Oh wait, so no, you said we are. Yeah, who are you? You're Constantine. Anyways,
who are you? And what are you doing here?
Yeah, who are you? Show me your papers. Although, given the state of where the U.S. is, maybe that's not a good joke to make. I'm so sorry. We're going to rescind that right now. Oh, Jesus, God Almighty!
Take that out in post.
Tyler, take that out in post. You probably won't because it's still the joke lands. But we have a fantastic episode for you guys today. Thanks for tuning in to listen to us talk with Jay in our previous episode, and today we have our continued series from Rum from Unexpected Places. And so, Constantine, who do we have?
We got a couple of yeast wranglers today. Way down just a little bit south of these guys are crazy. I mean, we're down in New Zealand, just a little bit south of where we are. So you go to Fiji, and the only other place you can go south is to New Zealand before you get to the penguins. We've got Callum Upfold from Line 44 Distillery, who is doing amazing things down there with yeast. And then going back over to the U.S. to this great state of Maryland, where I used to live, we've got Brett Steigerwalt, who Brett's sort of a dual threat here. Did I say that right?
Yeah, you did. It's been butchered most of the units, so that's a great first one. Good job.
Well, yeah, Constantine
with my
is
name,
the expert
I always try to look out for people's names because I'm the one who you're sitting there in the waiting room. They come out and they're like, patient, and then you're just like, okay, that's me. No, so I try to get the names right, but Brett's got a colorful history, and we've got Lyon Rum, not Lyon. I came in thinking it was Lyon. That one I messed up. And then another
Depends
project.
on who you ask, Constantine.
Depends on
who you ask.
Frederick, if Frederick's listening, he's going to be saying, no, it's Lyon.
It's Lyon Rum, s'il vous plaît. Yeah.
But we're going to just keep it light today with these guys. And what we're going to do is the topic for the discussion, keeping with our late night of rum podcast, we're going to have a small discussion on the novel fermentation techniques to create organoleptically complex rums with minimal additional process complexity.
All parts sold separately.
Terms and conditions apply.
Terms and conditions apply.
This is my master's thesis. Also known as my master's thesis.
Well, Callum, Brett, how is it going? Sorry, we told you this was going to be very informal and late nighty. So, how y'all doing today?
You want to go first, Callum?
Very, very good. Yeah. We started line 44 beginning of last year officially, though we had been set up beforehand, doing all the experimentation.
You were moonshining.
Studying. Yeah, though it's legal in New Zealand, so not quite moonshining.
Not in the backwoods of Alabama, Constantine.
No, so obviously a lot of places around the world it's completely illegal, and not that stops a lot of people, but in New Zealand it's completely legal to distill for like home consumption, which is a huge benefit to us. So reading about whatever we could, and then went into a few rabbit holes of all the old texts of how rum used to be made way back in 1700s, 1800s, all the way through to the early 1900s, and how it sort of evolved and changed and became more and more scientific, obviously, as everyone progressed more to wanting to actually understand how everything works. And then that really piqued my interest, because I love a good challenge, and then started to study more on how things actually work, not just throw in some molasses, some water, and some yeast or a wild fermentation or whatever. Wanted to actually see what was happening. How do you create really interesting flavors? How do you create these really special things that seem to be very far and out of reach thing to attain if you don't know what you're doing, and just got more and more interested into it. Then fast forward 5 years, began the company last year in February or January, and then commercially released
happy
our
1 year,
products.
by the way. Happy 1 year. Hey, and the crowd goes wild.
That's good. Commercially released our products July or August last year, so hasn't been extremely long for the actual saleable products, but we've got the knowledge behind us in that 5 to 6 years of crazy experimentation, and
And already some good reviews out there I've seen. Haven't tasted anything yet, of course, but looks like there's been some positive reception. This might be too much, but when you were making rum privately and then you started the company, the stuff you made before, you can't just pop out a 3-year rum that you made, right? You had
unfortunately
the record keeping and everything starts when the company starts, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the record keeping starts from a year ago.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, cool. I wish I could release an old rum, but it's all young.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And Brett, so you're doing similar things, like Callum's been deep exploring, the yeast and processes and things like that. And you're doing a lot of the similar stuff. I mean, tell us about your journey. I know I had a book that I was going to show here. There's the book for about nano distilleries that has Lyon Rum on the cover of it, which I've got. It's in the bottom of a box now. So, but that's a great book.
Yeah. How far should I go back since I started distilling? Or, I mean, I've been making liqueur since I was 19 in a dry county in college. So like, how far do you want me to go?
Ooh, hey, there you
Well,
go.
it depends on the statute of limitations in the dry county.
Well, I mean, it wasn't. I mean,
Did you
whatever.
cross state lines with that rum? Or
No, but I
those
did.
the
No, it's what happens when you go to school in Tennessee. So when I went to Tennessee Tech, it was in a dry county. So
Yep.
you just get one of the seniors to get.
So
you
is Jack Daniels.
Yeah, not anymore. Not anymore. I think
Oh,
they're-
they changed? Oh, okay. Haven't
Yeah.
kept up.
They realize how much tax revenue they lose. So they was like, oh, maybe we should do that. No, yeah. So I've been making the course since I was 19, and I started really kind of pursuing that more seriously when I was working for Bridgestone as a controls engineer back in like 2013, 2014. So I was working for Bridgestone in 2014, and was nearly ready to go to market with Coffee the Core, and just happened to meet someone who knew the owner of Lyon, Jamie, and was looking for something different than, working in the tire industry. Quick conversation led to an email. Email led to more emails, phone call. My friend moved from Portugal back to DC. So I said, why don't I come visit you? Because I wanted to see my friend. Came out, I came back home with some rum. They got some, samples of the Coffee the Core, and here we are. I moved, they gave me an opportunity, and I kind of crawled all the way through the door, and I've been the head distiller since 2018. Here at Lyon, we do things from blackstrap molasses and raw cane sugar. It's very common for a lot of U.S. producers. We use Lula Westfield blackstrap and raw cane sugar for that. So, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to do my master's work on commercially available bacteria, just to show people that it's a lot easier to add these flavors, especially now, than it was 100 plus years ago, because you actually have a lot more control on this. So if you want those acid driven flavors, at least from a lactic or an acetic perspective, there are bacteria out there that you can experiment with that will work and that are predictable and allow you to achieve those extra ester or mouthfeel notes in a somewhat controlled manner, and they're very predictable. So I ended up doing my master's research on that. I just used the very commonly used strain EC1118. It's a champagne style yeast. Lots of producers use it because it just powers through anything, very rarely has any fermentation problems. And then I use different bacteria from Lallemand and Fermentis and others just to prove the concept. And then that's kind of what kickstarted that whole thing. And then because it was part of my master's, I also did a deep dive into a lot of the historical Jamaican practices. And as far as I'm aware, I'm the first person really to process map most of them out to kind of simplify it, because I have, I don't know how many things thanks to Google Books and references because of that. So I tried to simplify it to help other people realize, here's what they were doing and here's why they were doing it. These were all deliberate attempts to get ester precursors in their fermentation so that they could make these really flavorful, beautiful, rums. And especially at the time, 1880s through the 1920s, I mean, they literally had just discovered what a cell was not that long ago. So they were still figuring out all the basic, microbiology and chemistry of what was going on. And they're like, oh, this yeast looks different than this other one. And that one, the schizo Saccharomyces looks different than the regular Saccharomyces cerevisiae. So like, it was really cool to kind of follow along in a similar journey to it's Callum, right?
Yep.
To Callum, and just kind of be able to present that in a very actionable, utilizable way for most distillers. And I have a big project planned this year that's just going to, if I'm able to do it, will really help people understand what's possible with yeast and bacteria, all commercially available. So I can speak more about that later.
Yeah, no, I mean, incredibly exciting stuff. And so I guess the first question for both of you is, you went down these paths of historic rum production and everything. I guess, was there a light bulb moment, like when you tasted insert whatever rum here, whether by itself or in the cocktail, that went, hey, I'm gonna focus on rum. Like, I love rum. Did you guys have what was an aha moment, if you had one? I'm so curious.
I guess I'll go first. For me, when I joined, when I was considering leaving Bridgestone, I was looking for an unaged product that I could build liqueurs from. And the problem as an at-home person who doesn't distill, because I didn't have the capacity to do that or experiment, I was only able to either get Everclear, 95% alcohol, if you're lucky, depending on your states, or like Smirnoff 100 proof for Ray and Nephew. And like there was a limited range of alcohols that I could utilize. And, there's only so much you can do on the back end to control flavors. And, vodka works, but it's boring. And rum is so versatile as compared to anything from, what whiskey can be, because most of the unaged whiskey is pretty harsh because, what they're trying to do with it. So that's how I fell into rum. And in terms of the flavor characteristics, I remember the first time I ever had a Smith and Cross, I didn't know rum could taste like that because in college we drank a lot of Sailor Jerry's and I thought I was sophisticated. And then I tried Captain Morgan private stock, and my parents didn't really drink much, so I didn't know any better. I was like, hey man, this stuff tastes good, it's sweet, it's delicious. I never associated like sweetness with rum. I just always thought it had these like wonderful characteristics. So I figured I'm like, that has to have sugar, as a liqueur maker. But that's kind of how I ended up in rum, just because of the versatility of what you can do with it.
Yeah, 100%.
And it's also globally diverse and beautiful, and it really does speak to the place.
Oh, 100%.
Nice.
Callum, what about you?
I think my entry point to rum was pretty similar to a lot of people. It was on the sweeter side. It was a Diplomatica, which they sugar quite a bit. I'm not sure if they do the very, very recent ones, but I know that the old green bottle that they used to do, and that one was definitely sugared. But I would say I've probably got 3 rums that really made me just be like, wow, this is the category of any spirit that is the best, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, that's
probably
awesome.
the first was Appleton's 12.
Okay.
Just because it's the most solid and reliable picture of what rum is, in my opinion. It's just you're not going to have anything too crazy, and it's not going to be so light that it's unrecognizable. It's so, ideal rum scenario. And then there was also Smith and Cross, because I love the intensity of it, even though it's not a highest rum technically, but it's quite high in congeners. And then the other one was debatable whether people would call it a rum or not, but Batavia Arak. And that for me was probably exactly. Brett's holding up a bottle of Batavia Arak.
The Baron von Oosteen. I know that the two O's. I know that that's not how you say it, but I can't help myself. I go Oosteen. Sorry, Callum. Sorry. Continue.
No, that's fine. So I think that was probably the real aha moment, was the Batavia Arak. Is that something can be not necessarily heavy, but have so much presence, and it can make anything that is mixed with this amazing and radiant and really just such a great product.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. And what's interesting, even if we just think about those 4 different bottles, the Diplomatico Reserva, the Smith and Cross Appleton 12, and then Batavia Arak, none of those taste remotely close to each other. I mean, and that's so wonderfully amazing about this category, whereas everybody usually defaults to, I had too much Captain and Coke in college, or it's pina coladas on the beach or whatever. Constantine, do you remember the first rum that you had?
The first rum I ever had.
First rum you had, and then the first one where you had where you were like, wow, okay, I really like rum.
Okay. So the first one I ever had was probably just your run-of-the-mill Bacardi silver, whatever it's called. I don't even know what it's called. The standard, Bacardi white from my dad's liquor cabinet that I probably snuck a sip of at 12 or something like that while I was reading Trader Vic's books that I found, which were fascinating. Fast forward, the first time I had a rum that I was like, wow. I sort of took a similar path where it was, it was what was the Captain Morgan, in the sort of
private stock.
The private stock. Oh yeah. You think that's rum? And then it was after that was probably Diplomatico was one of the first ones I bought where I was like, "Ooh, I'm fancy now," and I got the green Diplomatico, which I think just threw one of my last bottles of that away that we just finished. That had been sitting there forever. And I think one step further from that was probably I'm trying to remember because then it sort of exploded where I took a trip to Singapore and met Frederick, and then you know how that goes, right? You're sitting there, next thing there's 47 bottles on the table. But yeah, so that was kind of the path for me. Yeah.
Okay. I think for me, the first one that I ever had was, and I don't know if Captain Morgan owned it or still owns it, but I think it was the Parrot Bay coconut rum. I was like, oh man, yeah, this is good
You're drinking
stuff.
suntan lotion.
Well, and you didn't know at the time. You were just like, I was like,
Yeah.
I mean, of course, I was 21 years old. Anybody listening, I waited until I was 21 to legally drink. I didn't do it before. Definitely not. But the same thing with Callum. I think the first rum that I sipped that had me go, wow, this is something that I could actually enjoy by itself was the Reserva Exclusiva, the green matted bottle from Diplomatico. And then you just go down a rabbit hole, and it's fascinating that we all four of us are in roles where rum is our full-time focus now, which is just amazing that we all went down the rabbit hole,
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, the breadth
speaking
of that too, the Appleton 12, the Smith and Cross, and the Batavia Arac, you can't do that with bourbon, right? You can't get that
Like,
No.
right with right. So
like
take
even
that,
like
bourbon.
Japanese rums,
Yeah,
exactly.
right.
And yeah, that's the thing about with bourbon. It's like that's great. You can see some diversity in the Scotch world, but at the same time, we haven't even brought up Grand Arome, which is just a fascinating area. Yeah, the Holmes Key one,
Yeah.
100%. Another good one that I really like. So this is from Raising Glasses. This is actually frozen Vietnamese cane juice that they transported that was distilled at Rummy Club in the Netherlands, I believe.
Oh yeah.
That would have been
yeah,
an expensive exercise.
Oh no, you know
Yeah,
what?
right.
Actually, no, this was not the Grand Arome. So sorry. That's this is just a cane juice from the Netherlands, and yeah, a little expensive. Pele's Fury is the Grand Arome from Le Galion, which I don't know if I'm saying that correctly or pronouncing it correctly, but but guys, you both touched on kind of similar paths and trajectories. You both made it a point to mention diving into rum production, and maybe it's just in my mind, but I kind of felt that looked at production methods specifically in Jamaica, whether it's getting esters or what have you. So, I mean, Jamaica has been just a very special place for rum lovers for forever. So I guess, Callum, we'll start with you in researching just rum in general or Jamaica in general, what kind of stood out to you and helped you take the next step from, home distilling to, oh my God, this is so cool about this, that we've got to do this at line 44.
Yeah. So that would be Rafael Arroyo, the rum chemist of the 1930s, roughly. And all his work on Schizosaccharomyces pombe, or fission yeast. That really was very interesting to me, that he claimed took less time to mature in the barrel. They had a bigger body. They had more persistence. They just everything you want in a rum, really. Kept diving into that, and then eventually teamed up with Stephen Schellenberger of the Boston Apothecary, and Corey Widmeyer, who's a microbiologist in America. And together with their guidance, formulated how to isolate fission yeast, and successfully did so for quite a few strains. And then, began experimenting with that myself, and the results stood up to everything that Arroyo claimed them to be, as long as you are careful enough. Obviously, it can be messed up and end up being just like any other yeast, if you don't have the right parameters and everything. But it definitely delivered. And then from there, just kept on researching more and more into that. I now have over 23 different strains of fish and yeast that I've self-isolated.
When you say isolated, so you going out, you're scraping leaves and things like this to find these things in nature? Is that the process?
Yes. Yeah. So the best yeast usually comes from fruit. So you get a fruit from, I just got them from online or the supermarket, whatever. You order fruit from different places around the world. Sample it.
You're ruining the image of a yeast wrangler. You're supposed to be out there with a magnifying glass and a scraper.
Yeah, no, I had a lasso, and I was actually
I don't know.
I'd catch them one by one. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, but it would have to be like a little tiny lasso, right? So it's
Yeah.
Come on, you have to move slowly so you don't spook them and they run away.
I know, right?
Yeah,
or I was thinking it could almost be like, it could also be like Ghost Hunters where you're going in with the equipment. Found it. Let's get it.
Yeah.
Cut the leaves.
Don't cross the beams.
No, but continue. And you found that fruit has the best yeast, or fruits in general.
Just because of the sugar content. So obviously you want something that's gonna ferment, that's gonna make alcohol. Otherwise, it's pretty pointless. So usually you have to find something that has sugar in it, and then there's a bunch of other stuff as well. But the basic premise is it needs to have sugar, it needs to have nutrients, and fruit has all of that. So they're generally the best to be looking for. Special yeast is different types of fruit and from different areas around the world, or even different areas in your own country. It makes a difference. If something is 100 kilometers away or just down the road, it makes a big difference. And they did everything that he claimed they would. And we just began looking more into how to make heavier rums, read up a lot of the old rum chemists. There's some called Ashby, and then there's Kervegant, and also the Cousins, H.H. Cousins. They developed a high ester rum production method, which I've had some success using that as well, but you still need to be able to make the correct ferments to back it up. It's not quite a cheat sheet, but it's definitely a help. But you still have to produce the ferments that are at the right level of quality before you can continue down that path. Yeah. But had good results.
You both have studied these guys, like the old Arroyo and all of them. And I know, Brett, you've got formal education in this, I think, now with your master's program. I mean, how much were these guys intentional, knowing what they were doing and what to expect? And how much of it was them sort of, kind of poking around in the dark way back then? Based on what you've studied formally, and then looking backwards, sort of reading what they've done.
Well, full disclosure, I haven't looked at my master's in like 2 years, so I'm a little bit rusty. So maybe Callum can fill in the dots or fill in the gaps. But I would say it's probably a mix of both. I mean, you can clearly tell that, like when you read Ashby and you read Cousins, and you read a lot of these reports, because they're all published. They're all published from the Great Britain. At the time, was very interested in what was going on in the islands, and they were trying to think of it like a field station. I mean, many of these were at like the equivalent of like a field station. They were wanting to help, bring up this market for obvious revenue and all these types of things. So they paid to have all these extensive studies, done. And I mean, they had less, I'm not going to say rudimentary, but they had limited, equipment. They advanced equipment for their time, but obviously nothing like today. So they would show you, like in some of the things, like they were plating, just like Callum was talking about, and they were like, oh, this one is a different size thing, and they think it's what it is. And as you read the successive ones from the 1880s all the way up to, I think, I want to say 1906 is when Cousins published his little his process. You'll actually see them kind of referencing back to previous things about as they were literally learning this as they were going. So you can kind of tell that they have an idea, and they'll speculate on these, these documents, and then you can see where as they learn more, they're able to do more. And like with the Cousins process, that mainly came about because of the high tariffs for imports into, say, Germany. And there was a very big counterfeit market of Jamaican rum called rum verschnitt in Jamaica and in Germany. And that process allowed basically a rum concentrate to be made 100% to get around those tariffs. So they would ship this very concentrated product over to Germany. And then that way they may only put like 0.5% or 1% in like a otherwise non very high ester Jamaican rum, and they could bump up the level to whatever they needed to fit whatever market they were trying to target within the continent. So, like that's what led to these processes. And it's really cool to hear about, Callum's yeast strangling and his attempts at doing these, because it's something I've always wanted to do. We've not really been able to do that at this facility, especially now as, we get more busy with, other types of things. So I know that's a bit of an excuse, but man, that's pretty cool that you're doing that, Callum. I mean, like, I'm not going to say I'm jealous.
Thanks.
I'm really happy that someone's doing it. And all that I ask is that you're documenting it, because, it needs to be documented and it needs to be talked about so that other people, can also potentially learn from it. I know there's a distillery in Minnesota that also cultured their own Schizosaccharomyces strain, and that's called Black Frost.
Minnesota?
Yeah, Black Frost.
Yeah, so they're doing excellent stuff. So if you guys ever want to have like a deeper dive into schizo, I would recommend Callum and their head microbiologist at Black Frost. You could nerd out together, and it would be amazing for your listeners.
Well, and the cool thing about just that gets lost is when we're talking about fermentation, a lot of people, and myself included, I don't necessarily understand the fullest extent, but I do know the basics of everything starts in fermentation. Everything starts what your yeast is, whether it's a open vat, wild yeast, whether you're using Hampton's mysterious muck pit with dead people in there. I'm kidding about the dead people, but you're like, or you're like Bacardi and you use proprietary. And that's the thing. So I guess, as we're on this topic, keeping it in, because again, I'm too stupid for these things, but keeping it in like layman's terms, fermentation is important. So I'd love to hear from both of you why it's important and just the profound impact. Because like I can understand when I have a Hampton DOK, fermentation plays a huge part in it, and even distillation, which kind of gets lost in the conversation, but just would love to start at the basics of why is fermentation important?
I would say distillation is going to concentrate what you make. So as long as you nail the first part, you have the highest potential you're going to have for that whole process to get good stuff out the end. And I always consider fermentation like painting. If you're looking for flavors, there are natural ways to get them. And Callum can speak more to this because he's actually done this, besides my limited experience with the bacterial stuff. But you just have to think in terms of what flavors do I want? How efficient in terms of a time frame do you want your fermentation? And then what can I do to get that? And that's what they did in Jamaican with like cane acid and muck and dunder. And, Callum can obviously speak more to that with the Schizosaccharomyces, because I've, never experienced that cool strain, and, you've got 23 to play with. So.
Yeah, it's Callum on that. So he said you got 23, and you mentioned like being a painter. I mean, do you know those yeasts so well that for you, that's like your flavor palette, those 23 yeasts?
Not all of them, no.
Or is it not like that?
So I've got 23, but I only use a few of them. Some of them are very non-interesting. Some of them are extremely difficult to handle. Some of them just don't give the greatest flavor profile either. So they might perform really well, ferment really well, but then it's just a really plain and boring, nothing that I'm looking for. So probably the ones that I use, I've got probably 6 that are ideal. And then of those 6, 3 of them really stand out. And they're completely different flavors in each of them. But the biggest reason why fission yeast, or particularly Espombi and Arroyo's work, the biggest reason why that is so important is because of what it can handle. Predominant flavor, not type, but amount. So you can get a type of flavor from any type of yeast and it'll produce that flavor, but it'll only produce it in small amounts. If you want large flavor, like to use numbers, if you look at amount of esters in a rum, a standard easygoing rum will be around the 30 to 70 grams per 100 liters of alcohol, right? For example, DOK is 1,600 grams per hectoliter or 100 liters. A yeast can produce 30 to 70 grams of esters per 100 liters, but to get higher, you need bacteria, because the bacteria is going to produce acid en masse, and acid and alcohol together equals ester or flavor. So the reason why fission yeast is so important is because it will not die in that acid that these bacteria produce. Most other yeast will. They'll die very, very quickly because that acid is very toxic to yeast. Fission yeast can resist that acid to very, very high degrees. And because of that, it allows it to actually ferment through without stopping. It'll slow down, and that's why you get, the 2-week ferments, the 3-week ferments in places in Jamaica that make high ester rum, where they add muck, and muck is basically concentrated bacteria, adding all that acid to the ferment, and then the distillation, like Brett said, is you're taking everything that has already been created, and you basically, I like to think of it not as necessarily concentrating the flavor, but you're removing everything else. You're removing the water. So you're taking out everything that is already there. You're just taking it and separating it from water. So it's very, very important, whether you use open fermentation or closed fermentation, whether you use yeast or bacteria or yeast and bacteria, what it produces is the most important part. Distilling is almost secondary. It's still very important, but it's more of a, you're just deciding what to keep and what not to keep, but you're not creating anything new necessarily.
So I mean, like, if I think about it from in the most layman of terms, if you're baking, I don't know, cookies, right? You want to make sure that you have all the right ingredients and that you have everything ready, because because you put it into the oven, and if the cookies if there's too much sugar, if there's too much salt, if you use whatever, if the flour was bad, then that's just going to cascade and make a bad batch of cookies then. Yeah,
exactly. Okay. So garbage in, you get garbage out. And if you put something excellent in, you'll get something even better out.
Sure.
And that's also to two things to that point. And I say this, particularly to anyone in the distilling industry. If you're a great baker, you'll be a great distiller, because the skill set is almost like the same in terms of attention to detail, recipe, temperature, time, heating, all that stuff. Like, you really have to know your equipment. You have to know all those things. You have to know your oven. So it's almost a 1-to-1 translation. So if anyone out there is wanting to, is looking for a person to hire at a distillery or looking to start a distillery, find a baker. They would be great at it. Because we have a baker here on staff, and she picked it up like that, and it was very, very easy in terms of training and sensory. And also, to Callum's point, that's why if you look back at a lot of those old Jamaican practices, that's why they did cane acid. That's why they did that. That's why they did the dunder process. That's why they did the muck, because they were trying to be able to yield those very bacterial rich in certain flavor profiles. So acetic acid is going to make ethyl acetate. Dunder is going to be full of lactic acid, so you're going to get a lot of that ethyl lactate. Muck is going to have a lot of butyric acid, so you're going to get ethyl butyrate and those other types of things from that. And that's why when they were distilling all of that, that's why you get those flavors in the retorts. And the problem with what they found out was, over the entire season, because they're only sourcing from the same cane acid pit or dunder or muck pit or whatever, it became so acidic, it really hampered their ability in terms of yield for their final, fermentation process, so they could get what they needed for production. And that's what led to the development of the Cousins process, because Cousins realized, hey, all those acids are concentrated in the lees, or the spent liquid, in the low and high wines retort, or just the high wines retort if they're only doing a single retort. And his process was able to liberate and concentrate those acids, so that way when they did their next process, he would supercharge them with those acids that were already present. And that hot vapor would accelerate that ester formation in distillation. And that's what allowed them to create very high ester rums. We're talking like 7,000 instead of 1,600. And I could spare you a long history, but this eventually led to, the mandating of the maximum 1,600, which is where we are today. Not to say that people don't use it, but that's why it's important. So as long as you can create those acids in your fermentation successfully, you have a yeast that can thrive in that enough to allow sufficient levels to be made, then you can make these high ester products.
Well, then, and a quick follow-up is, what is the reason? Because as many people I've talked to at events or otherwise, what's the reason that it caps at 1,600? Because my go-to is, well, if it's higher, it's a perfume, but I don't know why that is, though.
Hold on. I will pull up the Rum Ether Control Act of 1934 and tell you.
Oh, there you go.
Hold on. It's going to load.
Do we need to do that? Do we need to get the scroll? Hear ye, hear ye. A proclamation. No, I know, I'm teasing.
I have to find the comments, because honestly, it just says the maximum ether content of rum manufactured in this island shall be, and the same is hereby fixed at 1,600 ether.
Interesting, because
hereby.
And the other thing too is, while I think Jamaica, and you guys can correct me if I'm misspeaking, but I think Jamaica is the one that created, and Hampton specifically created, high ester rum. But now, you look at what, for example, DDL is doing. I was fortunate enough to be sent down to the distillery with my brand work with them, but seeing all their different stills, which those wooden stills are nuts. But what is also cool is they have a copper John Doerr high ester still, which I'm just so curious about is, are they ramping up the esters during fermentation, or are you taking a regular run-of-the-mill fermentation, and is the still actually going, cool, here's 2,000 esters, baby, let's go? Again, I don't understand these things, and I'm so curious.
Well, I'm about to drop it. I'll drop that PDF in the WhatsApp chat. It's got a lot more to read. I'll spare your listeners, because it's several pages. I think that'll give you your explanation.
Okay.
I haven't gleaned it, so forgive me if it doesn't, but it's about the best I can offer you immediately.
No, that's perfect. Can't wait to dive into this.
And also, Callum, if you want, I'd be happy to send you my masters to kind of give more visual context. I'm sure you probably have all this already, but
awesome. Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah, just a quick deviation. So Callum, I got to ask you. I mean, I'm on the website. I'm looking at your rums. I am so curious about the names of these rums. The artwork, I think, is amazing. But you've got the Village Idiot, Dogs of War, the Sirens of, how do you say this one? Saviolans? I don't even. Saviolans. And then you have the Recondite Cavalier. I hope I'm saying that correctly. First of all, the artwork's great. Who's coming up with these names? These are awesome.
I am.
Hell yeah, man.
So I think I have to change the last one, the Recondite Cavalier. That one's going to change to the Cross-Eyed Maiden. But yeah, I mean, they're just stuff I came up with that really reflects the rum, I guess. Dogs of War is our highest rum.
Okay.
It's a 550 grams per hectoliter rum. So it's not like DOK levels, but it's just quite a good level, I would say.
And on that first picture on your website, that's your still? That's your setup there?
No.
It's very.
You guys check out the website, line44.com. The artwork on the front is amazing, steampunk sort of distillery setup there.
Did you do the artwork for the labels?
Yes, me and my cousin AI, we did the artwork. Yeah.
So I do have to say, I doubt, Callum, that you watched a show called "Are You Afraid of the Dark?" It was a show for Brett. Like I'm gonna send this to our WhatsApp group.
It looks like Brett has watched it.
Yes. So was it on Nickelodeon? I think it was. So it was like a kid's version of, some of them were absolutely terrifying. But so for your village idiot, I had nightmares, and I'm not gonna lie, every once in a while I still do have a nightmare about this villain. He was like a jester that would hold you up and laugh in your face, and then turn you into like a laughing zombie minion of his. So I'm just gonna drop Brett, just so if you haven't seen, click on the link to line 44 and their distillates. That's what this guy looks like. Reminds me about a little bit. Now, great. I'm probably going to have a nightmare tonight about the laughing jester who's going to turn me into a laughing zombie. No, but I mean, on a bringing us back outside of my ADHD deviation, I love the names. I love the artwork, and each one of these is just so unique.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, the village idiot was like that's our base level. So our running joke was, well, you know, if we can find it good, then I mean, even the village idiot will find it good. So.
No, that's good. And Brett, for you, I mean, with Lyon, I mean, is there about the distillery? Like, is there? I know if you go back to colonial America, there were 140 rum distilleries. I know New England continued to distill rum. We had Andrew Cabot, a good friend of the show, on talking about the Peter, what's his name, Vele article or something like that, which talked about rum production in New England after the Revolution. And they were trying to do all sorts of things like steam-powered warehouses, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm assuming Maryland had a long history of rum distillation.
Man, I have to tell you, I have not done a lot of research in what was done around here. As
No
far
worries.
as I can tell, like, I know that, like, we're in St. Michael's, right? So St. Michael's would at that time definitely have been a small port city. I mean, half the town is built on oyster shell beds. So just to give you, it was like a major fishing town. So I know rum was here. As far as the written history of rum, I'd have to get back to. I know, everyone associates Maryland with rye, and I know that was done, but I mean, it had to. I have not been told much about it, so I'll have to do some digging. I wish.
Yeah, no worries.
Wish I could tell you more, but I'm not going to be.
Sure, it did.
No, I'm sure it did. I think for me, as I was just curious, because looking at the Lyon Rum label, just that very beautiful crested anchor with the heart with the arrows, gives get very colonial vibes. Well, cool. Like, how did that? Like, talk about your label.
Okay, so I'm in my office. I'll just go to our website, and I have to go to the other room for the bottles. So our logo is a few things. So if you look at the logo, you see an anchor, you see two arrows, and you see some wheat. Because at the time when we started with rum, but then we realized that nobody had made whiskey in Maryland since 1978. So we started making rye, and that's where that logo comes in. So everything we do is made with love, right? So you got the heart. The anchor is because we are in a sailing town, of course, and there's a big, rich maritime history, obviously, in Maryland with, U.S. Naval Academy is only a 30-minute boat ride away in Annapolis. The arrows kind of represent like someone who, if they came over, they couldn't read, you kind of just write an X. So it's kind of like a, family crest, and that's it. Somebody has that X. And then the wheat is for the whiskey that we did make up until about 2018. So it has several layered meanings behind it.
Okay.
But that's kind of why we have that logo. It's cool.
I like it. It's a very clean logo.
I'd love to know more about the history. That's something we need to look into. I'd be happy to do that with you, Brett, because I went to school at Annapolis, and just the rich maritime history. I've been to St. Michael's, this was back way before the distillery existed. I mean, we're talking late 90s here. But there's got to be something going on there. I wanted to switch to another project that you've worked on
Brett, Rosalie Bay Distillery and what your role is in that. I've seen, pictures online of
You mean
bucket fermenters in the shower.
Hey!
Like
this bottle
Yeah.
here? I haven't opened it yet. I haven't tried it. So yeah, talk to us
it looks
about
like
the
a really
Dominica
cool
rum.
project.
Well,
Which Dominica, for our listeners, Dominica is an island in the Caribbean that is separate from the Dominican Republic. I'm disclaiming that because I didn't know until I got into rum that they were completely different places.
and pro tip, it's called Dominica. Don't ever say that.
Dominica. Ooh, you see, my dumbness is showing.
I did it too.
We'll fix it in post.
I did it
Fix
too.
it in
I got
post.
correct, and I was like, "Excuse me, Dominica." Well, okay,
I'll
so
take that. Excuse me.
Callum, you can probably attest to this. You never know who's going to walk through a distillery's door, right? You get a lot of interesting people show up. I mean, half the time they're bringing homemade samples, and you smell it, and you're like, "I wouldn't drink that." And they're like, "Why?" I'm like, "Because that's methanol. You don't want to drink it." You're like, "But it tastes good." I'm like, "You trust me. You don't want to drink that." So we had a marine biologist walk into the distillery in February of 2019. One of his friends lives in town. He was another marine biologist. And he had been going up and down the East Coast talking to distilleries about, whether or not it would make sense to use, distilling as a way to support conservation efforts. And everyone thought he was crazy, said you'll never be able to do it. He's like, well, Lyon Rums didn't start with a lot of money, and we know how to bootstrap and make things happen. So he said, hey, that doesn't sound crazy. Okay, so fast forward, June of 2019, I'm flying down to Dominica, which 2 years prior had gotten completely devastated by Hurricane Maria. Like literally where I ended up staying on the island was right where it made landfall. And I was in a destroyed hotel complex. It was one of like 4 buildings that had been, brought back enough so people could utilize them because half the small villages were destroyed. So you had a lot of local people living in that area because it was the one place where there were some stone structures. So we prove a concept. He goes, can we make rum from cane juice? Well, the answer is yes, of course, but we had to prove the concept. So I spent 2 days crushing cane with a friend down there, and we're crushing cane with a rotary thing and over a 5-gallon bucket.
Wow.
It was so exhausting. And then we tried EC1118, and like Callum mentions, acid is a problem for yeast. So those experiments showed that we had to hold the pH at certain levels, otherwise it wouldn't ferment because cane juice will drop very acidic. You'll get down to like 4-3, like high 3 range within 24 hours if you don't get your fermentation started quickly enough because it's so rich in yeast and native bacteria on it. So I spent 2 weeks on island literally doing fermentations. I had all the buckets in a shower in the hotel room, and then I was distilling literally in a hotel bathroom using the tub as a reservoir to circulate water with a little aquarium pump. Fast forward to 2020, we bought another one. We did get a bigger cane mill. Unfortunately, it ended up catching fire because the rotor lock with too much cane, and then the cord melted, and then the machine was on fire. So we had to go to the capital city of Rousseau and work with the local cane juice guy, and we contracted him to harvest a bunch of cane and bring it down there. And I was literally prepping cane and juicing it in full view of everyone at the bus station. There was a whole crowd. They're like, what are you doing? I'm like, you're going to be a juice man? I was like, no, I'm trying to make rum. We literally we juiced 25 gallons of cane juice. We pitched yeast right there. We drove all the way back across the island with the buckets in the back with the lid screwed down, and I'm just holding them the whole time. I'm glad I don't get car sick because it's like nothing but curvy mountains, winding roads. Again, distilled that, got closer. And then we finally, through generous donations, were able to build a hurricane-resistant structure. And big shout out to Chernelle Lane from Lallemand. She helped us select our yeast. We're using Distillamax CN, and it's a double pot distilled cane juice rum. And so we do a very narrow hearts cut because cane juice on the tails cut tends to get really dry. And you get this really unpleasant, not necessarily a vegetal note, but it just gets kind of bitter and dry on the sides of your tongue. So it took us a while to dial that back. So that way, we would produce a cane juice rum that we were looking to do that was very approachable. And what do I mean by that? Most cane juice tends to be very funky, very vegetal, very intense. very minerally. And, I love all those things, but not a lot of people, it can be a big challenge to get past if you're not used to it.
Sure.
We wanted to make something that was gently grassy and creamy, a little bit vegetal, with notes of like almond, like sweet almond, a little bit of marzipan, and some gentle florals. And the reason that we picked Distillamax CN was because it gave you a very nice round ester profile and could survive down to those pH ranges. And we were able to pull it off. And, we're really excited for what's coming. We got some Calvados casks coming in from France. And since we're a kosher distillery, it's hard to source, barrels. It takes a lot of, effort. And I recently just found out that Heaven Hill does have kosher offerings. So I'm trying to, work through some contacts there to see if they would be interested in donating to our nonprofit rum distillery any barrels. Because, 20 barrels for them is nothing, but it would be huge for us.
Yeah.
Sure.
What makes a barrel kosher or not?
I unfortunately am not a kosher expert. I can just tell you that it generally comes down to full control of the process and much other things. So if you see a rabbi, you can ask them. I can't really
just end to end knowing what's happened along the way.
Yeah, it's one of those things also where like if you're gonna have, say, a kosher wine cask, it will literally be in like a locked building until a rabbi can be there with a camera on it. So like nobody is messing with it. It's think of it like before there was an FDA, you had a reason for you needed it, and then you got the FDA, and they had all the justifiable controls so that people didn't get sick. It's the same kind of thing. It's a food security thing to know that from start to finish, it is safe and prescribes to whatever kosher requirements it needs to.
No kidding. Well, and that's so Rosalie Bay is now getting into the U.S. Thanks to John and Lori from Raising Glasses.
And I forgot to say, I have to shout out to Kernian because we just got back from Miami Rum Congress. It was our very first time ever leaving the island, and it was a wonderful experience. But yeah, our head distiller, Kernian, she's amazing, was actually living at the hotel in 2019, and that's how we all met. She was working security, and then she's like, hey, she doesn't even really drink that much rum, but she's like, that looks like a fun job. I would love to do it. And I was able to train her in 2 months of contact to make world-class rum. So she's amazing.
Well, that's amazing. And I totally forgot that we had a threefer because we have New Zealand, Maryland, and Dominica. Did I say that right? Did I do it right? Am I dead? Yes. I'm part of the Cool Kids Club now.
And is it Rosalie or Rosalie?
Rosalie.
To my knowledge, too, Brett, I think this is the only distillery in Dominica. I do have randomly a single barrel or a bottle of single barrel that says it's from Dominica from the independent bottler Blackadder, but there's no information. It says Dominica on the label, but there's no information because Blackadder, like Samaroli, you don't have. Where was it distilled? Yeah. How is this? You don't get any of that. I'll send a photo of the label, but maybe it's a misprint. Might be Dominican, but it says Dominica on the label. Anyways, I know I told it to John, and he was equally as confused. So maybe it was something that might be just a typo. I don't know.
And just because since we're talking about Dominica, I always have to be very sensitive to be fair to everyone. So there was a long-established distillery called Makushari that was run by the Shellingford family that was destroyed after Tropical Storm Erica. And then when Maria came through, it just kind of, as far as I'm aware, they're not operational. There is another distillery on island, and I believe, they source rum and they do wonderful blending work for the island. And I think they might be interested in doing some more actual distilling from, say, molasses or something in the near future. They are, I'm drawing a blank right now, but I've got the bottle. They are Belfast Estate. They're most famous for their Bois Bondé rum. It is rum infused with wood from the Bondé tree that's supposed to make you virile.
Excellent. I'll take 10. Yeah. And we need to get Fred some of that.
Yeah, but it's enjoyable. So there is a rich distilling history on Dominica, especially in the home distilling side, and you're actually starting to see a thriving local gin scene as well. There's 2 or 3 small gin distilleries throughout the island.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, because everything grows. Like literally, like at night you'll smell wild ylang ylang just the scent is coming down the mountains, and the vanilla,
dang.
all kinds of stuff grows. So,
All the things. Man, we gotta go. Well, and Callum, I mean, back over to you. We have yet to talk to Steve McGeary about rum in Oz, but as I understand it, there's, I don't know, 40 plus rum distilleries in Australia. What about New Zealand, though? Obviously, I get that they're completely different countries. I'm not that dumb of an American, mostly dumb American. But does New Zealand have a long history of rum distillation, or is this kind of a new concept? Because when we talk to some folks from Vietnam, the guys at Distillery Indochine that are doing sampan, nobody even knows what rum is, and they've had to come in and basically have the building blocks from, this is what we're doing, this is from sugarcane. Like, what does the rum landscape look like in New Zealand?
So I think there's I'm not entirely sure, because a lot of them are quite small and don't have a very big profile, so you might only see them if you're in certain towns or whatever.
Sure.
I think there's between 8 and 10, though I only know of 3 or 4, including ourselves, that only do rum.
Okay.
The rest will do rum, vodka, gin, a bit of whiskey, a bit of liqueurs, that sort of thing. So not a sole focus on rum. Because of our weather down here, unless you've done the deep dive like I have to find special yeast and use bacteria to its maximum, it's generally going to be a very light rum, because it's all yeast based, and because of that, there's quite similar styles. So like this, quite a New Zealand style, you could say, though each one is obviously different, because everyone distills differently, ferments differently, but it has a distinct New Zealand style to it. And at the moment, there's no real long-aged rum in New Zealand. I think there's some weird rare barrels that some people are holding on to, and then for what I know of, I think there's some 7-year-old rum that some people are producing here, well, have produced, are releasing at the moment. And then as far as like history of rum, I think there's more to do with whiskey distilling in New Zealand. Sure. There's a bit of history of whiskey distilling. I think there used to be a bit of rum distilling as well. I don't know as much of that side of history.
Sure.
But I do know that there was a lot of rum trade with all the, because we had a lot of whaling ships in New Zealand, especially down south where I am. One of the ports here is actually very well known for whaling. Also the well-known shanty or whatever it is, the Wellerman brothers.
Oh, no kidding.
They came down here, and they did a bit of rum trade, as well as predominantly whaling, though they obviously brought rum with, because that was a bit of a currency back then. So
sure.
Yeah.
No kidding. It's taking me everything in my essence to not start singing that damn shanty. It's so catchy.
There's a lot of Americans down here at that time. The whalers from the East Coast came down. There's a family in Fiji, the Whippy family, which was from Nantucket, and there's Whippies everywhere here in Fiji.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of connection, even going as far as New England, with the history of whaling down here. Is there cane at all in New Zealand, by the way, on North Island, or is it just not?
There's some in my backyard. Though it's in a greenhouse, so it can't grow down south in the South Island. It's far too cold. It can grow in greenhouses, but then far north, top of the North Island, it grows wild as well. So very, very slow growing, because it's not as warm and tropical as, say, Fiji or Vanuatu or the islands out there.
Sure.
But it can grow, but it's probably like a 2-year crop rather than a yearly crop. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Well, guys, I mean, I know that just a couple more questions, if we may. So I guess the biggest ones.
I've got time. It's all good.
All right. Ooh. So I guess the first one is Brett. I know Rosalie Bay is available. I know that Lyon Rum is available. I think first things are you have a number of SKUs that have come out, which is great. But before we talk about where people can get it, Constantine and I always like to ask distillery mishaps or accidents. We had Karen on, who used to own Montagna up in Crested Butte, Colorado, that talked about how the molasses tanks burst and molasses was actually dripping onto her customers in the bar downstairs.
The floor, into the downstairs bar.
Oh man!
Speaking
and the guy
of
was sitting with his
Vanuatu,
mouth open, catching it.
and we had Pierre-Luc Chabot from Vanuatu, from 83 Islands, talking about how a molasses tank exploded all over him. So would love to hear any distillery mishaps. Brett, I already saw you wincing, going, ugh. So I'm so curious.
Okay, well, I actually have. I mean, I have lots, but you're in here almost 10 years. You see things. Let's see.
Things that you can never unsee.
Well, whatever, right? It still beats making tires. No, none of that. The machines are cool, but I didn't enjoy that as much as I thought I would. Anyway, so the two that I can tell you is back in the early days. We delayed pitching yeast by 24 hours. Never do that. So what ended up happening, we delayed it a certain amount of time. So we finally got it in. We did a fermentation Thursday, and it went, 24 hours. Pitched the yeast finally. Everything kicked off Saturday morning, which we were alerted by our neighbor at the distillery. He goes and bangs on the owner's door. She lives, a few doors down from the distillery, luckily. Hey, there's a sound coming in. You can hear it through the garage door with this big loading door. Well, what happened was you had this. I don't really know exactly what happened. I think it was several things. You had some wild yeast and bacteria start kicking off that were producing a lot of, I guess, glycerin or glycerol. And then when our yeast kicked off, the glycerol was trapping all of the foam. So instead of the foam just dissipating, it was just building. So it was just a waterfall of foam just coming out of the top. And so the whole production facility got partially flooded, and then it kind of extended. And, things happened. So we had to call all hands and clean, and the floor was really clean after that acid. We had another one where somebody accidentally disconnected from the wrong end of the valve. So, the tripod goes here, but they disconnected right behind where the valve was by accident. So of course all the wash is coming out. Quick thinking, I'm like, oh God, what are we gonna do? I just put my hand over it, which is 1,400 gallons of wash. At that point it was 1,500. I'm covered in molasses, wash. And I just tell them, just grab my hand with your hands and clamp it as hard as you possibly can. And then we get someone else, we'll get a pump to transfer it over. So that was fun. I was, covered. Then we had one in Dominica where we're used to butterfly valves where if they're perpendicular to the flow, right, they're closed. Well, valves are different. Some valves are closed and they're pointed straight out.
Oh no.
I thought, and this is again, it was full of low wines because we have to, for the harvest season, we have to process all the, we have to, we're going crazy, fermenting, distilling until we're through the harvest season. And then you just got thousands of gallons of low wines in these big holding tanks that we then process for the spirit run. Well, you get used to a valve being perpendicular and closed, and you go to open it, and guess what happens? It's not closed. So again, I got, we lost about 40 gallons of low wines, and we're all panicking because we're down there for 10 days to help process all of this and with the team, for the continued training of how to do the spirit run. And again, my hand's over it, and it's my eyes are on fire. And then we finally realized, wait, let's just try it. And it finally sealed, but we lost about 40 gallons of that. So it's
oh no.
You get used to one thing, but those are some of them. Those are some of those that we've had. I'm sure there's others I can think of, but Code Browns definitely have happened.
Oh, Callum, what about you?
Luckily, not too much. There's been the occasional spill and small things that you just mop up quickly. A few fermenters have almost overflowed. I have like a jug of anti-foam on hand just in case. And I was adding nitrogen, which triggers a lot of CO2 release.
Nice.
And I saw this fermenter, which is quite, it's fairly large for us. It's a 5,000 liter, probably like 1,100 or 1,200 gallons. And it was filling up very, very quickly with foam. And I had to dodge that a bit. Some came out, but it was mostly all right. But the worst one was I was filling up the still, and I had no idea, but we've got quite a large diameter pipe that fills up the still, and it had a small nick in it, like a small little tear. But I had no idea because it was holding up. It was still pumping fine. I turned around for, I don't know, 5 seconds because, it's running all good. It's going well. I heard the loudest bang I've ever heard in my life, and the pipe burst at that point. And it was just like geyser of molasses and water and just everywhere. It sprayed all over. And I was in shock because of this huge bang that I didn't know what was going on.
Probably a little shell shock, to be honest.
Yeah. It took me about 2 or 3 seconds, and I was like, "Oh, right, okay, I need to turn this off." Ran and shut the valves, turned it off, but it was quite a bit too late. Quite a bit of the area was just covered in molasses everywhere. So that was my big mishap. It hasn't happened since. I've checked the hoses every time.
Yeah. The molasses just has that way of getting so deep into any and every far crevice. I still got molasses in my car, I'm sure, after taking the whole thing apart, trying to clean it. Oh man!
Yeah, and you clean it 2 or 3 times, and then the floor still looks a bit dirty, and you just go clean it again, and it still just doesn't look right.
Well, the gentlemen, they say in the north end of Boston, if you walk in a hot summer's day, you'll still smell molasses after it was like a humongous tank burst in like 1918.
Oh, wow.
Oh wow!
1918. You'll still smell molasses.
The tidal wave, like 20-foot wall of molasses that came down the street.
So
would it
come down quick, or would it be like the 50s movie The Blob, where it's like, I'm assuming it would go much faster than just...
pretty fast.
Okay.
Big tragedy, but
massive,
you smell molasses in a hot summer's day. And
for sure. Oof.
It'll take a while.
Which, I mean, it smells fine, for a second, but then, once it oxidizes, then that smell quickly turns from, wow, this is great.
Oh, yes.
Oh, boy. Which, Constantine, when I see you in Fiji, the first thing I'm going to get in your car and go, what's that smell?
Probably. That's what I do.
just because.
Every day.
Well, and guys, I know that we're winding down here just a smidge. So would love to have you tell our listeners, where people can find their stuff. So I guess, Callum, seeing as how importation to the U.S. is a big pain, is Line 44 available on like Whiskey Exchange or Whiskey World, or can American audiences get their hands on any of your rum, or do we have to come to New Zealand? Because I will come. Don't twist my arm. I will come, and I might never leave.
Me too.
Yeah, well, we're working on another sort of sales page for online. So we're going to have a look into international shipping and all that sort of stuff. I think it'll be a bit complicated, but we'll have a look into it. But I mean, if there are any independent bottlers out there that want to give us a hand and help get some stuff over to America, we're always open to it. I've got 1,000 liters of Heister rum sitting there waiting for anyone.
I mean, I do know a few people, so I'll make some inquiries.
No, but otherwise, I mean, we're just available locally at the moment. That's something that we're still working on, but always sending out our feelers, trying to get rum to the people that enjoy it. So, yeah.
100%. Well, then, Brett, how about you?
Well, first, for Rosalie Bay, you can find us if you go to raisingglasses.com. John and Lori have been incredible helping to get this into the country in the hands of rum lovers and rum clubs all across the country where they can ship. And for Lyon Rum, if you just go to LYON rum.com, you can see where we can ship to, and then you can see the states and areas where we are distributing. So that's the best place to go to figure out where you can get it. And if you can't get it in your area, if you have a friend in the area, maybe they can figure something out. So there's always a way. Where there's a rum, there's a way, right?
You know what? I will absolutely say this. So for anybody, because I know we didn't give updates, but anybody that is in Southern California, if you're not doing anything on May 26th, which is Memorial Day, I'm hosting my 500-person rum event in Long Beach, California, and Raising Glasses, John and Lori will be there with Rosalie Bay for you to try. So, Constantine, anything else that we've got that we want to touch on? I know we've talked on history, rum production, what we love about rum, distillery mishaps, and everything else in between. But anything else to cover?
Nothing else to cover on this. I think we covered a whole lot of ground with our yeast wranglers here. I mean, we went to Dominica, I was nodding along there, but I didn't know how to say it either. I was like, yeah, I do that. So we've learned a lot today. As far as stuff coming up, you got that massive event, which I wish I could get to, and there's a tiny chance I could get to, actually thinking about it. But then we've got in September, the Fiji Rum and Tiki Festival, 19 and 20 September. We had a new commitment for one of our all-star guests for that. Jeff Beachbum Berry from Latitude 29 and of Tiki fame will be here joining us. Sven Kirsten, the rum champion, Brian Inman, the Floating Rum Shack, Peter Holland. We got a great lineup of people coming down here. Danielle Dallapola, Daniel, if I'm saying your name wrong, I'm sorry. All-star Tiki bartender, also coming down to join us. So we got a lot going on for that. Social media, website coming up soon. Hope to see a lot of you here in September. Callum, you don't have an excuse. It's just a short hop.
Yeah. I'm hoping to make it as well.
Don't shame Callum. Don't you dare close proximity to Constantine. Close is probably like a 7-hour plane ride.
But
it's right there. You can see it.
Excuse to go on holiday. It'd be good.
Absolutely.
I'll have to check in another bag of rum bottles. Sneak that in there.
Do it. The maximum I've taken back to the States is 14.
Really?
Oh yeah. Like,
awesome.
I don't have one of those fancy like Yeti cases. So what I do, I bring, obviously the towels and things like that, but don't sleep on using empty plastic water bottles to provide like a buffer between things, because you can control how much air pockets that you have. I don't know why I'm doing the hand grasping thing, but you get the point. But yeah, like I fully plan on when I come back from Fiji, like bringing some stuff back, including a bunch of Bacardi 151, which is just sitting there on the shelves. Which I don't think for anybody that wants to go down, another selling point apart from going to an amazing event is you could find Bacardi 151, which here in the States, those things sell for like $300-$400 a bottle now, which is
wow.
Oh my God! Is there any rare nephew?
Oh, no,
we don't have that. We're sort of a rum desert here. I mean, the Bacardi 151 is just a weird outlier that just happens to be on the shelf. Other than that, we've got just the run of the mill, Appleton Bacardi. We do have Skipper, I think it's called Skipper rum, which is hard to find. Karuba, strangely, is all over the place here, which people say they can't find Karuba sometimes. Yeah. We got a few things.
Cool.
Well, few things in the work. Lastly, and certainly not least, if everybody wants to, our lovely listeners want to follow, stay up to date, what's the best way to keep in touch? What's the best way to be informed on all the great things that you guys are doing? Like social media handles and all those sorts of things.
For me, it would be Instagram. So at @almost_Icarus. You don't want to be Icarus. You want to be almost. If you're aiming for a destination, you can find, that's my personal page. You'll kind of find all the fun things that I have done or am doing. It is pretty updated. Whenever I go to Dominica, I tend to do all these stories, usually a day or two after we do things, so you can kind of follow along. And then, you can usually read articles that I write for Artisan Spirit magazine. That's a US-based publication, more on the technical side, but still pretty digestible for the average person to follow along if you want to do any rum related things, especially when I do this big yeast trial that I'll be doing later this year. It's going to be like 30 plus strains, all in triplicate, track all that. So just kind of show people what rum can be depending on the yeast that you use. And again, nothing like Callum is doing. So it's going to be very yeast driven, probably nothing crazy high ester, but it'll be for what it is, very helpful for the average person to see, just by changing one or two things, here's what you can, get.
Massive differences.
And to help other people make better rum. Because, as a rum drinker, I want all producers in the US starting off just making great rum. And then if they want to go to world class, that's on them. But if I can help you get to great really easily, everyone wins.
Absolutely. Heck to the yeah. Callum, what about you?
You can find us at Line 44 Distillery. That's on Instagram. I think Facebook as well. I don't have any personal ones. And then otherwise you can find us on line44.com. I'm always open for anyone to email me with whatever questions they have, or if they just want to say hi. Always keen to chat. So yeah.
Awesome.
Heck yeah. Well, that about wraps this one up, Constantine. I don't think we have a guest for the next month yet. We'll have something soon. We'll have a whole slew of everybody. But yeah, in the meantime, everybody, thank you all so much. And to our lovely guests, guys, thanks for the time. It's been so fun just chatting rum with you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I just wanted doing this in person one day over a few glasses of rum.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.